Welcome to Module 4. Module 4 is Asset Allocation, Portfolio Construction, and Behavioural Finance. Let's get started. What are our learning objectives for this week? Well, by the end of the week, completing this module, you should be able to understand what portfolio management is, the procedures used to calculate the return and standard deviation of a portfolio. You should be able to discuss the concept of correlation and the effectiveness, methods and benefits of international diversification. You'll be able to describe the components of risk and the use of beta to measure risk. Describe the characteristics of an efficient market, explain what market anomalies are and some of the challenges that investors face when markets are efficient. You should be able to list 4 decision traps that lead investors to make errors in their investing decisions and explain how behavioural finance links market anomalies to investors' cognitive behaviour. Let's get started. So if we have a portfolio, this means a collection of all our different investments that have been brought together to make a common goal. You have a look at this diagram. It's like a pie here. So this is the portfolio, and each different pie piece is representing the different investments that have been made. So the portfolio as a whole, that's been gathered together to meet the goals. Asset allocation is deciding how big will each piece of the pie be for each type of investment. We're trying to balance risk and reward. So we might see how this yellow piece is particularly large. So you might have that one bigger to balance out the risk and the reward of the others. So perhaps the purple slice here is particularly high risk, but very high reward. But we'll only have a small piece of our portfolio of that because of what our goals are or how our risk profile is. So we need to look at the risk profile of the investor, their goals, and how long are they investing for? What's their investment horizon? And that helps decide what the allocation is. So we're trying to look at how they all blend together, not just look at each piece individually. When we're looking at our portfolio, it's as a whole. We want our portfolio to be efficient. So that means we either want to get the highest possible return we can for the given level of risk, or we want the lowest risk for the given level of return. So opposite, swap it around. So when we're creating our efficient portfolio, we look to try to develop the best portfolio given the client's level attitude to risk and all the different options available. So we're trying to achieve the objectives and the goals of the client. So what are their goals? There are 2 types of portfolios. The growth-oriented portfolio, so particularly looking at the future increase in the investments, or an income-oriented portfolio, so particularly wanting to get dividends from shares, high interest rates, so to produce an income as we go along. Why would someone choose to have growth only? So growth only, no income being generated. Think about that. I'll ask you more about that in class. So why would you want growth only? Little bit of maths. So here is our portfolio return. What it is, it's the sum of each asset, each investment choice that we've made. What is the weighted average of that investment? And what is the return? And we add all those together. So the return is simply the weighted average of all the individual assets returns in the portfolio. And the standard deviation of the portfolio returns is a function of the individual assets' weights, standard deviations, and correlations with other assets. Let's have a look at an example. So I've got portfolio X, Y, and Z. So 3 assets in this portfolio. I've got asset X that's making up 40% of the portfolio and has a return of 6%. Asset Y is making up 30% and has an 8% return, and then we have 30% of Z. So for the return on the portfolio, you take each asset. So X, 40%, 0.4 times 6. Y, 30%, 0.3 times the return, 8. And then Z would be 0.3 times 4.5. Add all those up, and you get the total return for our combined portfolio of XYZ, 6.15%. So you can see X was giving us 6%, but we only had 40% of our portfolio of that. Y was giving an 8%, and Z was giving 4.5%, but together it came out as a combination of 6.15% return. So correlation, this is a statistical measure of the relationship between any 2 series of numbers, any 2 sets of data. How does it correlate? Does it have a relationship? If we apply this to our portfolio, we can say that our assets have either a positive correlation or a negative correlation. If they have a positive correlation, that means the 2 assets move in the same direction. So if one of the assets increases in value, then the other will as well. Or there's a negative correlation, so they move in the opposite way. So if one goes up, the other goes down. We have a correlation coefficient, which is the statistical measure of the relationship. If it's +1, that's saying that it's perfectly positively correlated. And -1 is 2 perfectly negatively correlated. Here's a diagram here of showing what happens with perfectly positively. So as P increases, so is M. It's completely matching. M has the same pattern of returns over time. Now, assets that are less than perfectly positively correlated, they tend to offset each other's movement. So that's good because it can help reduce the risk in a portfolio. So the lower the correlation, the more the overall risk is reduced. So if we have assets with +1, then it won't eliminate any of the risk. They're perfectly positively. Assets with less than +1, they eliminate some risk. And if they're less than 0, they'll eliminate more. And ones that are minus will eliminate all risk. Now, this picture is a little bit hard to see because my video is stuck right on the top of it. But this is a perfectly negative one. We'll just have a look what we can see. So it's completely opposite. So I think it's assets N and O. So N is the red line. So as N's return starts, you can see it starting to go down, then the blue line is doing the complete opposite. So N is going down, but this blue one is going up. So this is perfectly negative. They have the completely opposite pattern. Let's have a look at putting the 2 different types of assets together. So I've got here F. So F, as time is going along, they're increasing. Let's have a look at G. So as the same time is going along, G is decreasing the return. So they are negatively correlated. Not perfectly, it's not the exact same pattern, but fairly close. Now, if you have a portfolio that combines both F and G, then what happens to your return? You don't get this extreme up and down because you've got both. Depending on the ratios that you have them, your return is going to be almost, this is not quite it's going to be almost flat. It's not quite flat, but you can see that there is a lot less change happening in the return because you've balanced it out with ones that are negatively correlated. Okay, thank you for listening.